I want to move ahead to an article that V1SUT published this morning about the superintendent of Norman Public Schools, who makes $412,000 a year, more than the base salary for the President of the United States. And let me tell you where those figures are coming from. Those figures are coming from the Oklahoma State Department of Education. Every district has to report. Everyone basically who works under public funds and education is accountable. The public, that information is ours. Those are our dollars. We need to know what they make. This is a list of the 10 highest paid superintendents as of this school year. And you'll see that Nicholas Migliorino is the highest in Norman. It's not close to the largest school district in this state, but and its outcomes we'll talk about don't justify this. But he makes $411,000 and change, almost $412,000 as his total compensation package, which I found breathtaking. And the fact that it's been out there for a bit and it hasn't been reported on is really interesting to me. Now, if we look at the top 10 paid superintendents, you can make an argument about the pay scale being extremely high across the board for superintendents. We have some interesting comments, so I want to stop and take a look at those. The legislature needs to fix this too. Instead of saying the system is messed up and let's outsource to public-private corporate partnerships, will ruin the private education community. I can understand that comment. Sounds like we should take a summer break to dismantle the system and start over from scratch. It does. This is how we feel. Administrators doing nothing but taking money away from kids. That's an extremely strong point.
And Julia makes a great point.
What about our assistant superintendents? That's clear. That's not nearly the total for administration. It's ridiculous. We're going to talk about that in this article, Julia. We go on to what does Norman's district level administration look like? And you're right, it's expanded. There are a lot of high paying jobs in districts that are not the superintendent. This club is bigger than Lawton. The club has judges, attorneys, officers, sheriffs, legislators. Steph, I agree with you completely. The problem, going back to the previous case where children are sexually abused, is that there's an elitism across a lot of Oklahoma communities. I really see it in the rural communities where a very few people protect the people at the top across the systems. And it is crushing to the families there. It's unsafe. And if they speak up against it, if you speak up against the school, you're probably going to have the sheriff stopping your kid on the way home from school. If you speak up against anyone at the school, a judge on another matter may come down on you. I've seen it all. That's a great point, Julia. So moving on from there, Norman's superintendent, I'm going to call him Dr. Nick because it's easier to say than Migliorino, and I'm having a hard time today with my mouth. And that's how Norman refers to him, is Dr. Nick. He came to the district as a program director back in 2008. He was at several, taught at Moore, taught at Tahlequah, quite a few places, and then came to Norman. And then he left Norman Public Schools from 2011 to 2014 to market School Connect, which was an application that he developed while at Norman Public Schools. So Norman Public Schools was the first to use it. He was working there, and they used the school population there to develop this communications app. And then he left for 3 years to run that company in Norman separately, School Connect. Now, it was all marketed as free to other districts to get it sort of spread around and the name out there. And then in 2014, Dr. Nick sold the application to Jostens, which is the yearbook, class ring, school products juggernaut across the country. We have no idea what that sum was that he collected when he sold the rights to School Connect to Jostens. But he then, and this is from his LinkedIn resume, you can read a little bit about what he says about the application. But then he returned to Norman Public Schools after making that deal, was the assistant superintendent, and then in 2017, he became the superintendent. Now, most of the people listening here know that about Norman. Norman is where the University of Oklahoma is. It's become a much more progressive community politically because it's a college town. They have an enrollment just over 15,000, which isn't close to our big districts like Oklahoma City or even more, or Tulsa. But it's not small. It's somewhere in the middle of that range. They have a 4-year graduation rate that has dropped since Dr. Nick became superintendent. It was 89.4% when he took the reins, and now it is 81.3%, which is exactly state average. So if we're looking at performance of the district and outcomes for kids, it's tough to see where he might be the highest paid superintendent in the state. When you look at OSDE records on oklaschools.com, that's where the school report cards for school sites and districts are held. When you look at those, there are 25 school sites within Norman, and this is how they rank. One of them is an A currently. This is 23-24 year. 7 school sites are rated as a B, 9 are a C, and 7 are a D. So when we're looking at this, there's nothing
for
saying
$420,000.
Correct. In 23-24, 59% of Norman Public Schools kids tested below proficiency in that combined average of all of the major testing. And in math and science, 65% in both of those areas were below proficiency.
Oh, for Pete's sakes.
There's a lot of comparing districts in Oklahoma one to another, and there's a lot of people posturing as though they're doing a better job for kids than they actually are. But when you look at it empirically from the data, it doesn't look good. So also in Norman schools, which I don't know if I can get this all on here. Yes, I can. You'll see this is particularly for math, but Oklahoma Schools does a really great job of giving you some visuals about how things are going. And this is essentially math proficiency. So you can see that proficiency, they call this academic slide, where kids are becoming less proficient as the years go on. So we're missing things at one level, and the next is building on the next and building on the next. And by the time we get down to 8th grade, we're seeing a really low 22% proficiency in math. That's really keeping a lot of kids from heading into those STEM careers and the things that are really going to make them self-sufficient now. Let's see. Another thing that I think teachers will be interested to know. This is a little hard to find, and they don't update it on a really timely manner, but the OEA, the Oklahoma Educators Association, does a salary comparison of the salary scales for teachers in the districts in and around Oklahoma City. So the wider Oklahoma City metro area. And if you go and look at this one and look at some of the past ones, which takes a little digging, Norman is not a high payer. They don't have a high teacher pay scale to say that maybe, some districts have more money than others. Are they paying really well across the board to attract the very best people, particularly in the classroom? And that's not what we're seeing. Places like Crooked Oak, Deer Creek, Edmond, Moore, Mustang, Oklahoma City, and Piedmont have a higher teacher pay scale than Norman, which is showing you that this money is being pulled out to administration, and it's not necessarily there in the classroom anymore. And teachers are the ones who are dealing with all of the current problems of higher acuity in the classroom. We're seeing more violence in the classroom. We're seeing all kinds of things. The number of special education students has exploded. So there's all these huge challenges to teachers who are trying to do a good job, and the money is not going there where I believe parents would want it to go. And that's one of those nonpartisan issues. Everyone thinks that good teachers, should be making more money. So when you look at all these factors and you say, okay, why is Dr. Nick making $412,000 a year? There's really nothing that jumps out to justify this fast increase in pay. And what you'll see here is from 2018 all the way to 2025, how his total compensation package has increased dramatically.
Unbelievable. Scores draw. It's an inverse proportion, kids. What we call in math an inverse proportion. As the scores fall, Dr. Mick's price tag rises.
It appears to be so. So,
well, can we back up just one quick second, because
absolutely.
there were some good. So Julia says the lobbyists will never allow legislators to stop this, and good people don't have the money to replace them all with the people who can't be corrupt. The only answer is to pull out kids. Come on, parents. And then John says, when you tell truths about the wrongs of the school in the small rural areas, not only do you have the sheriff coming after you, you have a large amount of locals doing the same. The know-it-alls who know nothing. And then Steph says, oh yeah, I mean,
I have witnessed that.
I feel
John.
so bad. Remember the one lady whose kids were in, and I can't remember which school it was, but they posted that questionnaire that was so highly sexual, and she got it out, and then basically she had to homeschool her kids because they just treated her and the kids so badly. She had to pull the kids out. It's disgusting. And then Steph is talking about the that app that Dr. Nick made, and she said that the conversation can be deleted on the backside so you can remove incriminating information. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then she also made the point too that the elite children are probably going to that one school, the one that actually has the good scores. So, and Sherry says, and the whistleblowers have been fired in some cases. So, Common Core in the new school system. I mean, it's true. I mean, good. So he makes 33. Steph broke it down. $33,000 a month.
Okay. Well, if you weren't upset enough, we're going to move a little further into this. Okay, so there is a school board member in Norman, and I want people to remember, and I want parents to really understand the power under state law to change your public school lies in the local school board. For you to run for your school board, and if the superintendent is not getting the job done, you vote to remove the superintendent. It's happened in one night in districts across the country. They flipped a school board and everything changed in one meeting. So I want people to understand that. Now, this is Alex, and I don't know, I think it's Rougier. I'm not sure how you say Alex's name, so I'm just going to refer to him as Alex. So he was voted onto the Norman School Board in April of 2022. And in his Facebook posts about it, he talked about being the first openly LGBTQ plus member on the Norman School Board, and claimed that in electing him, they took a stand for LGBT plus children and families who are being targeted. Now, his comments, and I always want to point this out, this labeling and connection of children with these acronyms that describe adult sexuality is really emblematic of what's going on in this country where parents are fighting back. It's part of what the divide between parents and public education, where that's been created. So I just want to point out that Norman is steeped in this ideology that says we can talk about adult sexuality with children. And there's some Facebook posts in here from school board member Alex. Now, Alex ran on lowering, and there's a quote in here, Norman Public Schools administrative bloat, quote, and restoring community trust through board transparency and accountability, which those sound like great things. We would hope Alex would get in office and do that. But then in February of 2023, that's approximately a year later, he posted about an upcoming school board meeting and talked about Dr. Nick's 3-year contract coming up for renewal. But he said that the district doesn't wait for the contract to expire to renew it, but instead renews the contract each year and extends it for another 3 years. And the quote here is to provide the superintendent with job security should the public elect a board that does not support the current superintendent. So they are boxing out the voters by keeping this very highly paid administrator on a perpetual 3-year contract where he is always in the first year. And you go, this is just in case voters say, we want to go in a different direction. We don't agree with the ideology. We don't agree with the results, whatever it is that voters don't agree with. They don't want them to be able to take him out. Well, that's a really strong statement. And he almost sounds like he's bragging as though he's doing the right thing for the community. So if you dig a little deeper here, the comments from the community were not good. Not good. They caught it on his Facebook. So someone named Ian Moore said, I'd like to know the justification for the board renewing this contract. What objective measures are you using? And school board member Alex says he can't talk about what happens in executive session, but they use their strategic plan, which is a strategic plan they came up with for 2022 to 2027. And we'll talk a little bit about that. It does not tie to student assessment outcomes. It does not tie to student grades. It ties to a lot of other soft elements. So Alex goes on to say, I'm sorry, the public has the right to know how he is specifically graded. I don't see an issue that's been successful in the strategic plan. That's why a lot of us don't trust the board, consider it a rubber stamp. Apparently, this constituent gave him empirical reason to not renew the superintendent's contract and is pushing for the democratic process. So there are engaged citizens trying here. And school board member Alex said, I'd sure love to talk to you about what's in executive session, but I can't because no one else will vote for that, essentially. So then another constituent says, why the 3-year terms? That gives the people no leverage if a job is done poorly. And she starts to call out other board members. Why should the superintendent have job security if the public shows it wants to move away from him? These people caught it and they're questioning it. They're calling it a sweetheart deal. So,
well, what else do you call it?
Well, I would be furious if I was a Norman resident that you're taking away my democratic right to make change within my public school system where my children go. So if you look at the strategic plan, it has elements of teaching, learning, safety, security, culture of belonging, the budget, world-class workforce, and improving internal and external communications. And you can click on this area and go to teaching and learning. None of that has to do with student outcomes. There is nothing that would tie his pay to how this is working out for kids academically. And here's the part that might be a little mind-blowing for people. To design this strategic plan that is now the benchmark for how we evaluate our superintendent, the district used taxpayer funds to hire Koch Communication, Kochcom. They're an advertising and marketing firm that were behind the district's passing of a $354 million bond proposal in 2023. And you can click to their website here. They are known, their specialty is pushing the expensive plans of politicians and public agencies. So if you think about the trolley cars downtown, they did that PR. If you think about, go click on and take a look at some of the other things that they did and helped to market. They're a marketing firm. So they evaluated this, they actually created and helped design the survey that is supposed to evaluate the strategic plan and therefore say, how is Dr. Nick doing? So they ended up surveying little over 4,800 quote unquote adult stakeholders and about almost 1,700 high school students, which sounds pretty good, but they never disclosed how many of those adults were district employees, community partners who are on one of 40 of their advisory committees, which is just hundreds and hundreds of more people. We don't know how many of these were pure parents who have kids in the system as stakeholders. So it's really, the survey is suspect at best. It feels like a political marketing survey. So NPS's publicly espouse core values of integrity, inclusivity, collaboration, and optimism came out of this strategic plan. And with that in mind, the survey included questions like this one. Do we deliver a full range of racial, social, and indigenous perspectives that are honored and respected in teaching to create broad understanding in our schools? So those are the kind of survey questions that are determining how this strategic plan is going and thus justifying these large administrative salaries. And they use taxpayer money to hire a PR firm to create this entire system of planning, of evaluation, and of prioritizing the education system within Norman Public Schools. Jenny, you're shaking your head. I think I need to let you comment.
Well, I'm just sitting, honestly, because I was curious about this Koch com. And because I wanted to know, did it have anything to do with the Koch brothers? And it's founded by this person. This is really interesting. So it's founded by this person named Kim, spelled with a Y, K-Y-M. Koch is her middle name. And she was from the Oklahoma Quality Foundation. She was a principal with the Oklahoma Quality Foundation. And I kind of wonder, what that organization did. These people, I just see things. Oh, and Oklahoma Quality Foundation was a catalyst. They serve as a catalyst for building better organizations across Oklahoma by inspiring role model performance and results that help you live and fulfill your mission and vision. So it's just frustrating to me because listening to you talk, it's propaganda. And we talk about propaganda on this show a lot, but the thing that's the most frustrating, and I know that our viewers are most frustrated by, is somehow our tax dollars get paid to propagandize us to release more of our money to go for tax dollars, to go for all this crap that's like a black hole of accountability, and transparency and everything else. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Julia says parents are so oppressed they won't step out to vote because good school board members ought to vote for good school board members. We lost our only good one a couple of weeks ago because the school people show up to vote for status quo. That Norman went blue. This is what happens when you go blue. Is Norman blue or purple? For the blue had registered red and now are purple with rhinos, which is what we talk about. UConn is supposed to be the reddest of the red. Our schools are blue, though. Taxpayers are paying for that again. Stop the madness. Word salad. Has anyone checked? Oh. Well, I am right now, Lisa. He's still on the phone. Probably not happy that he's still on the phone.
Julia's thinking about the school board elections is exactly what my thoughts were, and why I went back to look at that survey that's evaluated everything to see if they would tell me. And they have a series of videos on their website that are showing how they're doing on all these points within their strategic plan. And they give you this data, but they don't break it down. So I'm unable to see how much of it is the education establishment evaluating itself, which is not working well. He's alive. Hi, Michael.
Is he there?
I'm alive. I'm still here.
Okay. All right. Well, Lisa was worried about you, so she'll be happy you're on now. Well, and I want to make this point too. All while we make sure to defend programs focusing on improving our schools. And Becky has been going through a situation right now so that she would know exactly what she's talking about. And then that's what Judge Meters did, basically. So, I mean, But the problem that we get into is, while we all sit here and scream at the screen and, whack our fingers on the keyboard and watch our blood pressure go up and know all of this is happening, unfortunately, until we break through the propaganda to wake the people up that are being propagandized by these public schools and by Coke's advertising and whatever, we're stuck. I mean, we're stuck.
Well, maybe let me go a little bit into this contract, because I would like to give constituents of a lot of towns a little heads up about how this is happening, how a superintendent comes to make $412,000 a year. And keep in mind, again, the school board in Norman voted for all of this over and over and over. Okay. So NPS, this massive superintendent's contract, when that school board member on Facebook was talking about how this keeps this superintendent, protects him and keeps him in place in case the voters vote out the school board as a majority. I questioned, okay, how is that? How did they manage that? So Visit did an open records request and got his last 3 contracts. And everything school board member Alex said was correct. He is renewed. He's been renewed every year for the past 3 years, but on a 3-year contract. So he's perpetually on the first year of a 3-year contract. Right now, his contract goes until June of 2028. This is Dr. Nick on the left and on the far right. And this is him just this month giving an award to the Norman Public Schools Foundation, which is the fundraising arm that many of these big districts now have. And they used to be very separate. They did things like help raise funds for materials in classrooms so they wouldn't come out of teachers' pockets. Now they've become a de facto extension of the district. Sometimes they're even housed within the district. And we'll show you their organizational chart. They have the Norman Public Schools Foundation on their leadership organizational chart for the district. So this is not a separate thing happening. So let's take a look at his contract. Here's how it's calculated. He has a base salary, which this year is $261,000 and change. They guarantee him a 2.25 raise each year of the contract. Although if the off-scale employees, so the non-teachers who are stuck on this scale that the district has them on, if the off-scale employees get raises that are higher than 2.25, they have to give him the higher raise. And even though it sounds like that raise is set, it is not set, because then later in the contract, it says during years 2 and 3 of the contract, we can throw that set raise out the door, and the board and superintendent can agree to renegotiate salary and benefits at the commencement of each fiscal year. And in no event shall their salary and benefits be less than what he got the year before. So there's no talk of how kids are doing. His salary's going up every year, no matter what. Then they have an annual retention stipend that gives him an extra 10% of that base salary. That was over $26,000 this year, just for not quitting. They gave him 25% of his base salary as an annual contribution to a 401(b) retirement plan, though he can elect to take those funds directly as salary. That's another over $65,000 just for the year. He has paid medical, dental, and vision for himself and dependents. All costs paid into the teacher's retirement system are paid by the district. If he gets sued as superintendent, all of his legal costs are paid, and any judgment that would happen is not coming out of his personal money, no matter how he was involved. He has paid long-term disability and life insurance up to a $250,000 death benefit. He also has this additional flexible benefit allowance for superintendents that we need to look at in state law. Don't even know why it's there. Reimbursement of travel and other so-called necessary expenses, which are not spelled out, so we don't really know what those are. But I have an inside source that claims, I cannot verify, that the superintendent has a clothing allowance within this. And they pay all of his membership dues for all of the NGOs and civic organizations like the school administrators, the national and the state, Oklahoma Association of School Business Officials, Rotary, Kiwanis, all of them. And they provide him with the actual device of a cellular telephone.
Well, don't say they. We need to change it to we, because it's the taxpayers that are paying this. I mean, stop saying they. It's we pay
yes.
this.
So you're exactly correct. I should correct that. The 5-person Board of Education approved for Norman constituents to pay based on this contract. And it's every year for the last 3 years. Now, what happens in the contract if the voters say no more of this? If they have a Burlington, Vermont moment like this week with the survey that went out to middle schoolers about explicit sexual acts, and they rise up in mass and they take out the board and they say, not this superintendent, right? Well, they will be out well over $1 million if that happened right now, because the contract has a clause that pays him severance pay equal to the superintendent's compensation, which includes base salary and all of these fringe benefits.
Wow.
For 12 months or the remainder of the contract term, whichever is more. So now
this is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard.
Are these contracts coming from COSA, or who's making these contracts? Do we know?
Really good question. I had the last 3 off an open records request for the Norman superintendent. I don't have any others, but it would be really interesting to start rolling out open records requests to see if this is some kind of a standard setup. But if Norman fired him right now, this is double jeopardy, fiscal double jeopardy for any district. So now imagine they fire him. They have to pay him out between $1 and $1.5 million to get rid of him. And then they have to hire someone to cover the same 3
we
years.
have to pay.
Exactly. Norman constituents have to pay to then hire someone for the 3 years that they've already paid the departed superintendent. It becomes impossible. And that's what board member Alex was talking about. This is how we give him job security should the board flip.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know performance clause in there. I didn't see any performance clauses.
No.
Oh, wait. There wasn't a performance clause?
No, there's nothing that's tied to.
He doesn't have to perform for this.
No, and it doesn't even stipulate what the school board member said in his Facebook post, that this is tied to our strategic plan. It doesn't say any of that. There is no downside. So now we start to understand why school administrations start to run like a kingdom. These districts start to run like a kingdom because there's not no accountability. There's not even room in the contract for accountability.
I'm disgusted. I mean, I honestly, somebody needs to get an interview with him and ask him what justifies being this deep into the pockets of Norman taxpayers.
Well, I will tell you.
And state taxpayers too, I am assuming, because, all that money is commingled.
Correct. So in the thinking of this journalist, the responsibility for this lies on the elected school board. So interestingly, in February of 2025, 2, including school board member Alex, who made the Facebook post about the contract, while I got chaos going on, I'm sorry. While in the past, all of this superintendent's contracts have gone through with a unanimous vote. In February, 2 voted no, not to approve this. It still went through on a 3-2 vote, but one of them was the gentleman who made the Facebook post, almost bragging about how this gives the superintendent job security. And the other one is a woman named Annette Price. So both of these folks ran on bringing transparency to Norman constituents. And I reached out to both of them to talk to them about why they voted no. And they've had 10 days, maybe more. Neither one of them got back to me or would comment publicly at all about what's going on there. So even when they vote no, they're not willing to stand up and say why they voted no or stand up for their constituents about this. So
Well,
I did
not
not
go back.
Superintendent because the thinking there is that this school board is responsible. School boards hire, fire, and review superintendents. That's their job. But they're not, again, now school boards don't seem to be very accountable as well.
Well, so it's like what Julia said, the status quo gets in there and they somehow manage to get them in. But there have been a couple of really good comments. If I can get this to work, for some reason, this program is not working this morning. Steph says they're not saving lives. They do nothing to make anyone's lives better, and they get the bank. If anyone else can come up with an idea other than voluntary taxes, let me know. We know, Jules. We hope that we could do that. The benefits are by far a lot more than a salary. People will not listen when you try to explain this. I wonder how many days per year my husband works to buy this guy's clothes and trips. And that's the thing that just irritates me. How many people out there in the private sector, like my husband, who have 2 advanced science degrees, don't get paid a fraction of what this man makes with dismal education results at his school? It's pathetic. The school board members should be absolutely tarred and feathered for allowing that. And the people, for Pete's sakes, should be the ones with the tar and the feathers. Has this been reported to Stitz Doge joke? And they would, yeah. What a contract. Parents are supplying the kids' classrooms with tissues, and this is a good one, with tissues and markers, but this guy gets a taxpayer-funded cell phone, which, by the way, they won't even let kids use in school now because, we can't have cell phones in schools so that kids can report what's going on with them. That means we should have access to its contents, by the way. So that's true. Maybe you should put in an open records request for all of his cell phone records, because if it's paid for with public funds, then it's open to public review.
Oh, well, let me tell you something about that. What I specifically set up there, that the device is provided by the school. He pays his own service for the phone, which is interesting. Because that makes me wonder if then they would then omit those things on an open records request. So he gets a cell phone paid for by NPS.
And it's personal.
Exactly. So there are a lot of ways around open records. So
Julia says it's almost like moms could stay home and raise their kids if they didn't have to pay for their superintendents.
Correct. That's an interesting observation. So if we want to talk a little bit more about this superintendent, I do want to remind people about what happened during COVID, because I think that's really critical in your thinking about knowing where they stood on these restrictions and things during that time tells you a lot about where the district's at and where this administrator's at. Now, Migliorino,
and let's couch the right terms, how they stood on personal liberty.
Correct. That's a huge concern here in this district. So this superintendent currently serves on the executive committee of the Oklahoma Association of School Administrators, and he was very much in step with their public statements about what should and shouldn't happen with COVID restrictions, requirements, and school closures. So we had Senate Bill 658 go through, which prohibited a lot of the mandates here in Oklahoma, but NPS continued to push those and put pressure on people to mask, vaccinate, and quarantine. And there's some quotes in here directly from Superintendent Migliorino. The medical community has made it abundantly clear that masks are an effective tool in stopping the spread of the virus. We've seen this from experience that masks work beginning Tuesday, September 1st. So this is going into the 21-2022 school year. It is our expectation that anyone who enters our buildings will wear a mask. All visitors to our school will be required to wear a mask. That's actually outside of what state law was at the time. Also kept pressuring families to vaccinate. Here's a quote: state law prohibits us from mandating masks or vaccinations. As a public school district, we will not work in opposition to the law, but I'm imploring each and every one of you to help us keep our schools open. Help us care for our kids, not your kids, our kids and our teachers. Wear a mask, get vaccinated. So this was pushed even after it was illegal in the state. They continued to move schools to virtual learning and even closed the district on some days during 2022 due to COVID-related staffing issues. And now if you take a look in 2025, we have these little pops of virus that are happening. So now Norman Public Schools, which is highly vaxxed, highly masked during those days, continues to close even in January of 2025 due to ongoing mini epidemics of respiratory illness. So what used to be our snow days now in these districts that push these things are now district-wide sick days, which I find really interesting. I can't tell you the why behind that, but I have a lot of suspicions that the vaccine didn't help a lot of people. We have some suffering immune systems, and or we like the policy of being able to close schools for reasons other than imminent weather threats.
We like the policy. We like the policy of denying people their personal liberty. They want to be kings and tell the people who pay their salaries what to do.
These do become control mechanisms. You're correct. So one other feature of Norman Public Schools that I thought really sort of fit the progressive narrative is they had an executive director of diversity, equity, inclusion. And she came in 2020. It was sort of a big thing in the media that the legacy media made a big deal of. And they had to reposition her after the law passed and said in 2023, we're not going to do any discriminatory DEI positions or activities. She is now the director of student services, but she talks on her LinkedIn about on her resume, it talks about that position. So for them to actually have that position in Oklahoma is an exception rather than a rule. And if you look, so Julia made this point earlier in the comments. This is their leadership organizational chart. So Williams, who was their former DEI executive director, is part of this highly paid 8-member, quote unquote, cabinet of the superintendent. So that's this new thing that's popping up. We saw it at Western Heights, which is an extremely progressive district. So if he's getting paid like the president, he might as well have a cabinet, okay? But then, so there's 8 people on that cabinet, but then under them, there's this leadership organizational chart that is massive. These are not people in the classroom. These are all directors and analysts and coordinators and executive directors that work at the district level. There is a massive amount of money coming out of the classrooms in Norman Public Schools. So in all, some people are benefiting at Norman Public Schools. It just doesn't seem to be the families and the taxpayers.